Hello citizens! So a while back on this channel I described Ahoy as Starcitizen but with sails instead of spaceships. At the time it was half a joke. Now it's a comparison that's getting a little less funny and a little more interesting. Before we get into it, quick disclaimer. I am not affiliated with the developers in any way, no partnership, no sponsorship, no early access deal, nothing. The only connection I have to this game is that I back it on Kickstarter like many of you did. That's it, so this isn't a sponsored update, it's just me, a backer and a fan of the genre, looking at where things stand and, honestly, sitting here with my fingers crossed and pretty much everything else crossed too, hoping this game turns out to be something special. If you missed the first video, Ahoy is an ambitious multiplayer Age of Sail project, deep sailing simulation, crew gameplay, naval combat, eventually something closer to a living world at sea. When I first covered it, I compared it to Starcitizen not because of scale or budget, but because of structure. Community funded, system heavy, long-term vision, the kind of project that lives or dies on execution and trust. And now we are starting to see what happens when that kind of ambition runs into real-world development. The big headline from the latest journal is simple. The first playable phase sea trials has been delayed. Originally Q1 2026, now targeting July. On paper that's not a catastrophic delay, a few months, manageable. Most people would accept it without much fuss. But in crowd-funded project, the delay itself is rarely the real story. The real story is always context. And the context here is, let's say, familiar. The team admits they should probably have communicated earlier. They knew things were slipping, they waited, hoping they could still hit the window. That's human, that's normal, but in project funded directly by players, timing of communication matters almost as much as progress itself. When news arrives late, even small delays feel bigger than they are. At the same time, if you go back through the previous journals, a lot of this was baked in from the start. Ahoy wasn't originally meant to be crowdfunded, the plan was traditional funding, partnership, maybe institutional support tied to the historical side of the project. Then the industry hit a rough patch, funding dried up, investors pulled back and studios closed, and suddenly Kickstarter became the path forward. That changes everything, because instead of building quietly with secured funding, the team scaled up after the campaign succeeded. And when that happens, you get the classic post-Kickstarter shock. Money takes time to clear, budgets take time to stabilize, hiring takes time, pipelines take time. In their case, the campaign ran mid-2025, but they didn't really have financial clarity until early autumn. Development accelerated properly around October, which means the timeline we saw publicly and the timeline they were actually working with weren't quite the same. Add to that the fact that they're building a lot of systems from scratch, setting physics, ship mechanics, dynamic rigging, war tech, and you get a project that's spending a lot of time laying foundations before it shows results. They've even swapped out core terrain technology mid-development to support long-term world scale. That's the kind of decision you make if you're thinking years ahead. It's also the kind of decision that slows everything down in the short term. Does that ring any bells? So when people look at the delay and think, uh-oh, here we go, I get it, I really do. We've seen this pattern before. Ambitious community-funded project, expanding scope, shifting timelines. The comparison to Starcitizen isn't about scale or budget. It's about the structural rhythm. Build foundation first, show gameplay later. Manage expectation as you go. But there's another side to this. The latest update is actually pretty candid. They take responsibility for the delay, they explain what went wrong, they explain the hiring issues, the budgeting delays, the reality of scaling a team after funding. That kind of transparency doesn't fix everything, but it matters. And we are not looking at multi-year leap into the unknown. We are looking at a few months. That's still within the range where trust can hold as long as progress becomes visible. And that's the key word here, visible, because until now Ahoy has existed mostly as promise and potential, systems under the hood, tech updates, but very little actual gameplay shown in motion. The team has said repeatedly they want the first real look to feel cohesive, polished. That makes sense, first impressions matter, but it also creates pressure because the longer gameplay stays unseen, the more perception drifts. The good news is that they've now committed to showing gameplay footage in the next journal, and that more than any roadmap date is the real turning point. Once we see the game running, ships moving, crews working, the conversation changes instantly. Confidence rises or falls based on what's actually on screen, and that's the moment where this stops being theoretical. And I would say that it's also time for a boost in momentum and a shot of confidence. Yes, because the sailing and naval genre isn't an empty landscape. This year alone, we've got projects focusing on naval combat, others focusing on the joy of sailing itself, cooperative experiences, different interpretation of life at sea. The ocean is getting busy, which means Ahoy doesn't just need to exist, it needs to carve out its identity clearly and quickly. As someone who backed this project, I'm not sitting here hoping for drama, I'm rooting for this game. I want this to work, I want to step onto a deck with a crew and feel something unique. So yes, I'm critical where it makes sense, but I'm also hopeful because it's still early enough for course correction to matter. And I want to be very clear about something before we wrap up. I'm not here to tell anyone to buy into this project right now. I'm already in, I backed it, I'm following it closely, I'm updating you because I'm involved and interested in how it develops, but whether you support it, wait or stay on the sidelines, that's entirely your call. Everyone should make the decision that feels right to them. What I will say is this, the upcoming gameplay reveal will likely answer a lot of open questions. For people who are undecided, that footage is going to matter far more than any roadmap or devlog. It could reinforce confidence, or it could raise new concerns. Either way, it will give us something concrete to look at instead of just projections and promises. So, where does that leave us? Not in a crisis territory, not in blind optimism either. We're in that middle stretch, the part of the voyage where you check the compass, look at the horizon and wait to see how the ship handles in open water. The next reveal is going to matter a lot because once we see the game in motion, we'll know whether this project is settling into a steady course or still finding its sea legs. Until then, I'm staying cautiously optimistic, eyes open, fingers crossed, and hoping that when we finally see Ahoy in action, it sails as well as it promises. Okay, like this video if you found this information useful, share it if you have friends who are crazy about masts or Latin sails, subscribe to the channel if you want to stay up to date on the project or if you want to have a laugh with funny videos about Starcitizen. In short, all the things you know we ask you every time. Goodbye, citizens. See you at sea or in space.